Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're having a multimedia conversation about five fun and new ways to think about the internet. We didn't want to talk about just the future of media, the future of social media. I just find those topics to be so boring and cliched. We want to talk about ways we can expand the way we look at the internet and not look at it in such a narrow light, which I think we're accustomed to. So I want to offer some refreshing perspectives. I'm here with Jaleesa, who I'll let you introduce yourself. And we're just really just trying to have a great, engaging conversation about the intersection of media, art, and technology. So, with that being said, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Jaleesa Cypress. I am an astrologer and a consultant, and I've been doing a lot of work with just the future of how we're engaging with our identities, um, specifically around being artists and how the internet has sort of made us all artists or has unveiled the fact that we're all artists. And so, sort of what we do with that and that new understanding of the impact of the work that we make. I think we're going to talk about this, obviously, but this whole idea of content creation and how these platforms have changed our relationship to ourselves and our identities is really fascinating to me. And I think it's a really important and worthwhile conversation because also as an astrologer, I know there's a lot of movement coming up in 2025 that we haven't seen in 7+ years. So a
Yeah,
lot of movement on the horizon.
I wanted to
And
I wanted to
yeah,
say something to add to what Jaleesa does. So, first of all, I've been following you, let's say pre-COVID. And recently, you have been posting more on TikTok and kind of blowing up on TikTok with these ideas about what the future of celebrities look like. And what I love about your perspective is the astrological context makes it have another like dimension that's just interesting. For like the avant-garde folks, the artists, the performers, and the technologists in the audience. So I just wanted to make sure I said that too, so people hope go check out your stuff on TikTok and can get a better sense of like what you do on there.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how these platforms can bring different things out of us and
Yeah,
bring different ways of saying things out of us that we didn't think we needed to say in that particular way. And I think that this is like a huge conversation that's happening because of the potential of a TikTok ban or whatever that even means. Right? Is like what that platform has brought out of humanity or what that platform has brought out of being able to create and understand ourselves in a particular way.
yeah,
Um, and I know that we definitely want to talk about just this because this also I think is what TikTok shattered is the concept of online versus offline and the difference between real life, quote unquote, and the internet,
yeah,
and kind of shattered the wall between the two or made the difference between the two very blurry and also like concerned a lot of people about our relationship to online versus offline, and I love your perspective on that. So let's start there.
yeah. Don't mind if I do. Okay, so one of the things that's so unique and special about the millennial generation is that we are the only generation. No one can ever take this away from us that we're in a vulnerable neurological state of adolescence as the pinnacle, like as the starting point of the internet. So what I mean is that, let's say most American families had a desktop computer in the house by at least 2001, right? Maybe even as early as like 95, 96. But by 2001, we had this mainstream adoption. And again, what makes it so special is that we have a memory of the pre-internet world and post-internet world, as well as Gen X and obviously all the generations previous to us. But again, what makes us different is that we were developing at the same time that the internet was integrating. Gen X did not experience that. They were mostly already prefrontal cortex developed by the time the internet went mainstream, and Gen Z only knows the world with the internet. This is why I think we're so special because we have this connection. We're the bridge to both worlds. Okay, so with that being said, our introduction to the internet was a stationary experience, meaning that we went to a physical location in the house to be able to connect to the internet. You had to literally be confined to a certain destination. It wasn't mobile. It wasn't a mobile experience, and not only that, you typically had to cut off other telecommunications in the house, like your phone, just to enable the internet communications. So that's pretty hardcore compared to like now where it's like literally floating all over the air. You can go anywhere and find you some Wi-Fi, some internet. And so it used to be marketed as a destination. It was hard, first of all, to market the internet. At first, it was used more, well, initially it was for the military. Then it became more involved in like bigger companies that had to do calculations as well as academia. Other than that, it wasn't really a consumer facing product or um yeah, it wasn't a consumer facing thing. So when you have the rise of like Netscape and particularly AOL, who kind of like created an interface of what the internet could be. And there were, it was kind of like a multimedia experience. You had like the equivalent of like a magazine, or you had these chat rooms and photos and not videos yet, obviously, but it was the first time it was like, okay, what can this internet thing do? Most people were just like, what am I supposed to do on the internet? Like, what do I do here? That's only for nerds, or that's only for. So it took a while for all that to get integrated. All right. All that being said, once the iPhone came out and we started to have a more mobile internet experience, our paradigm of the internet being a destination, a place where you log on and log off, that paradigm is still in our heads. That's still the paradigm we're operating out of. When the reality is that the internet is very much integrated pretty much in every aspect of our society, at least here in the Western world, we can say. And so when we hear language like, I just want to be offline, or the real flex is logging off, or, you know, put your phone away, right? It's not that these are bad sayings, but in my opinion, they're kind of an outdated paradigm, because it's almost like saying, when the car got popular, it's like saying, well, just don't have a car, but you live in the middle of a suburb in which the entire environment was designed based off the car. Or the nation, right? There used to be a time in history where the nation was railroads and off-beaten paths and cobblestone, but when the car was invented, they paved these beautiful cement roads and highways to, again, integrate the entire country to each other. So it sounds naive and outdated to be like, well, just get off the internet, or just throw your phone away, or just, because it's too integrated. And so when we're building technology, if we're building it in that older paradigm, it's not going to it's not going to be as seamless as a more innovative technology, which I talk about as well. So that's the gist of what I mean when I talk about offline versus online.
Yeah, I think what you just said was really making me think of is how everyone was saying that podcasts are what changed this recent US election, and how everyone was so upset that they were basically saying that podcasters and who had the most airtime on podcasts was what made like our US political system what it will be. And people were really upset about that because who has dominated the podcast space, and the personalities that have dominated the podcast space, and who has the monopoly on, or what they think, who has a monopoly on technology to make dominating that kind of field possible. And this sort of like bitterness that we have uh, towards people who have sort of mastered the internet, or who have succeeded in these spaces, and this kind of like being tell me if you see this, but it's almost like people waiting for the internet, quote unquote, or internet culture to fail or to fall away so that they can be like, see, it was just another fad, see, like I was right to really hold on, and hold out, and butt up against and reject. Because in the past there were a lot of things where it was possible to do that, and like trends, trends and trend cycles, and the fact that it's kind of like the internet is not a passing trend, that it's now an integrated aspect of the functionality of our lives, I think is something that we haven't really processed, and thus have started to have created that cognitive dissonance in order to kind of survive the reality. But we're the ones who are creating that us versus them, like the humans versus the tech. And there's also this weird dystopian, right, sort of visual of like our physical fleshy bodies being merged with tech, and that's sort of like, well, that's where we're inevitably heading, or like AI is going to take over everything, and they're going to kill, like there's this like mortality is what's really being brought up, right, in this conversation around technology, is our limits, our mortality, and that really just scares people on a fundamental level. And the interesting thing about like TikTok rising so much during COVID, during a time when our mortality was on our minds more than ever. And so this relationship between our mortality and the internet is something that I think we've created as like a subconscious link that we haven't really as a culture talked about, because we don't have public spaces to talk about the internet as on a macro scale, or in a macro way. We only have these micro conversations, and oh, it's just philosophy. It's like, well, it's also like something that's occurring so rapidly that we haven't actually figured out systems to process, and ways to integrate. And I want to say something else without taking up too much time. But the in astrology, the planet that's sort of the planet of the internet is Uranus, and that planet is sort of a marker in astrology for innovation's sake, and evolution at any cost. So it's very spontaneous, it's very sporadic, and it's very uncontrollable. It's an outer planet, it's not personal. So there's personal planets and there's outer planets, and so that sense of like going beyond the personal, and how that then like social media came, and it was social and it was personal, and so there's all these like weird mirrors and like trick mirrors and uh little subconscious links that have been created and reiterated over the past 10 years, that we just haven't been able to talk about. Do you think that that's why, do you think that conversation is what we need in order to be able to integrate and at least like come to terms with where we're at, or what is it?
Oh, unmute myself? Okay. Okay, okay. What I was saying is that the way we designed most of the social media apps, or the apps that we interface, the software that we interface with on a daily basis, was designed in a way that cannibalizes our attention span, and so that not only are we not sensitive to the fact that the internet is changing the world so quickly, but we literally can't have a conversation about it because we're so distracted. We're a very distracted world, and you can't really get much done when you're distracted. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. Like, I try to talk about it, but it does feel like sometimes, like, how do you stop a whole world from getting sucked into these gamification exploitative algorithms that's changing the way you think, it's changing the way you shop, it's changing the way you speak, right? You don't even know it's happening to you, and it's happening on a global scale. How do you stop that truck?
The question of do we need to is also really relevant, because like this like, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," like this sort of like panic thing that also the internet thrives off of that kind of, right, clickbait. It thrives on that like panic and fear and those kinds of things. And I think that, it happening so quickly, do we even know what to do or what to do with it? Or and it's like, well, is there anything to do about it? Or is it more just about acceptance or recognition and intention as well? Like, okay, what's my intention with interfacing with tech? And I think that that's when you're talking about like the home computer versus the portability of tech. I think that's where we really split in terms of understanding what our intention was, right? When you go on the computer and it was dial up and it took 10 minutes to load a certain page, like you had to really want to go on that page. Or when you had LimeWire and like you thought it was maybe going to be that clip of oh my god, the president talking about, the clips that would hijack a bunch of LimeWire um audios. You had to really want that song to look through everything and feed through everything. And so that sense of like real intention. Whereas now you pick up your phone, you ask Siri, you can ask it anything, you can do anything. And so that sense of like having to really have that cognizance around, yeah, the intention around the tech and how we're interfacing with it. It's just, it's different. I keep forgetting to mute myself. You're also on mute right now. I feel like it's still the conversation around the offline versus online, and if getting offline is an option. Um,
I, I had another point I wanted to make to that. I do appreciate your question of, do we need to stop it? Right? That's profound, because I do think it's refreshing to not automatically assume that everything about technology is bad and everything that's happening in technology right now is bad. It's not that simple. There's just no way. But I do feel strongly, because of the way we observe millennials and their nostalgia, that we are going to be upset with ourselves and are already upset with ourselves in how fast our worlds have changed, and how the ideas of what the world would be like that were promised to us in younger age, where the vision of the future didn't have the internet necessarily in that same way. We kind of thought we would be like our parents in a whole different political and social and economic climate. But if you pay attention to American history specifically, the way we flip cultures, the way we transform them into entirely different worlds every 10 years, every 10 or 20 years, especially, after the Industrial Revolution, um, it's almost like we have alienated ourselves from the more traditional pace of ancestral wisdom and communities and cultures that have up to 100 to 200 years of essentially being the same, right? In agrarian cultures, where you're not getting these technological quantum leaps every 10, every 20 years. And it's become more frequent, because now people are like talking about AI like the internet's done with or something. Like, oh, now the future is AI. Like, no, the internet is still a baby. The internet's still a baby. And before we even get, but that's what I mean, is like we're getting these quantum leaps in technology so close to each other, and it takes decades for them to bloom and us to actually figure out what the hell is going to happen. We can't make that call right now because we're not even 20 years in. Not even 20 years in. So that was my last point I wanted to make on that.
yeah, I feel like that's incredibly just even saying the internet is a baby is such a it's such it creates so much context and it creates so much perspective. I think people have really lost perspective with the internet. I remember when I was really, really young, and the internet was starting to become a thing and cyberbullying was a thing. And I remember that being like, whoa, like the first time someone, really like didn't come to school or didn't feel safe in their home or whatever, they did to kind of like cope with what was happening on the internet. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, this is real. This impacts like your real life, your real self-esteem, your real body, your real relationships, or does it? That was the question. Is it superficial, or are you kind of like ill equipped if you're letting what's happening on the internet impact you in the real world? And I think that also what you're talking about when you were talking about people feeling like they wanted to or had the promise of living in the world their parents did, um, that really makes me think about our kind of number 2, which is this, like, the death of the rabbit hole, the death of the website, like, because the website is like online real estate. And, uh, that's sort of like, that sort of felt similar or equivalent to a physical business or, like, physical real estate, and that sort of, like, transferred over. I just saw in my mind, like, the little Monopoly houses, like, little plastic houses. It felt like, "Oh, okay, this is, like, sort of familiar," like, and then we just, like we sort of blew past it. So and also to say that Gen older generations that are not millennials, um because everyone's different, but in general older generations beyond millennials, that sense of like internet rabbit holes are not actually really a thing. Like, that's where those all those memes about, your mom saying, "Oh, do you know her?" when you show her a video of someone on the internet, right? That sense of like they don't go down these rabbit holes, they take it at face value, they see what's right in front of them. Um so, yeah, I'm curious to hear what your initial thoughts are on this piece about the depth of the website and the rabbit hole. Uh, yeah.
Do you know her is hilarious. I think there's two different natures of rabbit holes. So the rabbit hole that I'm referring to that is dead, as well as like the website. Let me just say, I don't think the website is dead, but the function and utility of it has, by a way of the apps that we use by way of their design, have made the utilitarian purposes of a website less of a priority. So, what that means in layman's is that we're clicking out less. So, before it was like, there used to be like a .com culture where it's like, I go to your .com, I go to your .com. That maybe I find you on Twitter, but I go to your .com. And that's what you really own. That's your flag in the ground. Then the apps got kind of savvy and they were like, well, we don't really like when you guys click out, especially if you're not clicking out from our advertisements. We need you to stay here as much as possible. So there was less incentive. And so then it was like, all right, well, do I really need a website, or maybe I just have a Linktree type um, link where I can branch off to essentially my other rented areas, because again, your domain you own, your social media is like for rent. You're trading your content to get this exposure and this distribution through these algorithms. We don't really think of it that way, but that's what we're doing. Now, okay, before I would get people to go to my .com, where I have more agency, more control. You get to even get, if you have Google AdSense on there, you're getting data on who's coming to your stuff. Now everything's built where it's like, well, you got to grow your Instagram, you got to grow your TikTok. Well, I don't own these things, right? Duh. But secondly, they have gotten better about designing it in a way where you don't want to leave that. I literally, if I'm going on TikTok, I'm not going on TikTok to go explore people's blogs and links. I'm going because of the second rabbit hole. So the first rabbit hole is like literally the Google 1. Web 1.0, 2.0 rabbit hole of I'm going into the raw internet because that's what Google was. It was an index of the media that was on the raw internet. Then we moved into the app world where now I have access to this media, but we're kind of locked in this third party application. And they play by their own rules and they change every fucking day. And there's other third party applications and they all have their own incentives and none of them play well with each other, but you better figure it out. Content creator, go. Right? So, um, so there's less of a chance, even if you get internet famous today, there's less of a chance that someone's going to go to your website. Like becoming internet famous today just means that I see your face on my algorithm maybe 2 or 3 times a day. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that I really went in and did more research. So we're stuck on here. And I only know you in this capacity, and you only know me in this by these micro experiences when you're in zombie mode scrolling. I have some media real estate in your zombie scroll mode. Well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? And this is why, and we can lead into the next one about, because I think we're going there. This is why artists have, we need them. It's not even like, oh, it would be nice if there were more artists involved. If we don't have artists, this is going to become more and more meaningless, because if the only way we can really connect to the modern consumer is through this micro moment, and we're going to let ads get in the way, we're going to get content creators get in the way, we're going to get all this exploitative media get in the way. Like, it's to me, art is kind of like the kryptonite to this bad shit, because it comes with craft, it comes with meaning, it comes with humanity, it comes with the intention of we must connect. So we need that to be further integrated so that we don't, completely dry these rabbit holes up, even though I kind of feel like it's too late. But
Yeah, I think the something changed on your audio because now there's feedback.
I didn't do anything. I just muted myself on.
Yeah, but your audio also went out on the live. I don't know if we should just take the live off because it's feedbacking.
It's causing more problems.
Yeah. I'm not sure. What do you want to do?
I don't care, as long as we get good recording of the Zencaster.
Yeah, because I don't know if it.
Tried to be fancy.
Yeah, we tried to be very internet. I think we can. I think let's deal with the live. Oh, she said it's fine. Okay. It was just feedbacking for me. I could hear my own voice through Alex's thing, and your audio cut out at one point. So I just was making sure because my priority is also that this conversation is recorded in a way that makes sense. Okay. Um. Anyway, so yeah. So what you were talking about around basically still like internet real estate, like that it's just kind of like pieces like sliding all around this like slippery slope. And honestly, in general, like also with physical real estate, like who owns, this is like insanely macro, but like who owns the land, like the earth? Who are we buying property on? Or like we're buying dirt from each other? Crazy. And so the way that the internet creates this like micro but macro scale of that, of the kind of like clownery of ownership, and of like, well, what are we actually doing here, and what's the actual purpose if you're only going to see me on your For You page if I can make it there, if I can make enough clickbait or make enough make a kind of like snappy enough title to get your attention. And I think that you're right that art does cut through that noise, but I also think that we are at this weird juncture where, as you've said, like there's a lot of artists who are tech phobic, and there's a lot of people who are on the internet who are artists that don't know they're artists. And so we have this weird lack of conversation going on. And I think that a lot of artists have become isolated. What's so crazy is if you go to an exhibit like, an Andy Warhol exhibit, or any of the surrealists of certain times, like they all hung out together and they're all friends and like they all knew each other and there was this like community and this camaraderie that is just it's just not the case anymore in the same way. And so that kind of isolation or having a friend who thinks like, oh well, if you make art for the internet, then that means this about you as a real artist or whatever, these kinds of levels of lack of conversation that we're having or limited conversation that we're having about what the internet is actually does impact our ability to understand ourselves and our identities as artists and creators. And creator is even like a weird washed out word for an artist that I feel like these platforms started making so that they didn't like give anybody too much of a ego boost that they're really the talent on these apps. um like that you've become the on-screen talent for a TV show that you're not getting paid for. Like they'll give you pennies on the dollar for if you can make it into the creator fund or whatever. And so this way of like artists and creatives, not creators, internet creators, but creatives and artists have always been interested in how to take power back and how to understand impact and like just how to like work with a gallery space, right? Like how do you space things apart? How do you all of those kinds of different considerations that get lost in the flattening of internet media. You know, we need to like sort of bring those values back. And I think that's also the conversation about craftsmanship, right? It's like, well, how do you make something nice or luxury or just worthwhile or that can last? And what does that look like in the internet world? And I think that that's a conversation that anyone can have, that everyone should be having, that anyone can take away from this conversation. Is about that kind of like staying power. And memes are a really interesting uh, version of this, right? Because a really important cultural moment can live on through its funniest 3 seconds or its funniest still, but it's still a capturing of that moment and of history, and also the sort of best part of something that's actually trash could be memorialized in the same exact way. And so there is a sort of democratization of value that the internet does bring that I think can help to and has helped artists. Like artists who I never would have known are and who never would have gotten into a gallery because they didn't go to art school, they don't know anyone, whatever, are making a living off of their art because of TikTok, because of this. Um and of course, there's conversations now about like, oh, I wish I didn't have to be a content creator to be an artist to live full time. Like, do you know what you would have had to do if there wasn't an internet? You would have to be emailing, walking into galleries, on the phone. Like, you would have to pound the pavement. So this is just a different version of pounding the pavement. But yeah, I definitely think artists need to be a part of the conversation. Do you also see that the identity of artists is a bit like in flux? Do you see that as well?
Um, I think that there are a lot of artists who feel pressure to be called content creators and they don't feel like it fits right because content creator implies an algorithm where artist doesn't. Content creator implies social media where artist doesn't. And I see a distinction between artists, content creators, and creatives. Like content creator to me is someone who's making it a business to create lots of media for commercial purposes, right? And then you have your creative who I don't think is as extreme as an artist, but still wants to incorporate color and originality and modernism, contemporary aspects to whatever it is they're doing. An artist is the more pure and, yeah, pure, just, I don't know how else to describe an artist, but as an artist, but it's their purity that is the distinction. where a creative is, maybe they'll wear a cool outfit or they care about culture and they're immersed in it. But an artist is like shaking people to their core with the experiences they're providing, whether it be through music, fashion, this, that. They are really getting to the the marrow in people, whereas a creative is not necessarily penetrating that deeply, like on a psychic level in the zeitgeist. People are not crying to your music in the middle of the night to a creative, in my opinion. They're doing that for an artist because the artist is keeping that purity in their work. So that is why when you put the artist next to an algorithm, there's a friction because the algorithm doesn't appreciate purity. It's not going to reward the intensity of art, where where it's a lot of it is about being present. um and so we, in my opinion, artists have to get even more creative. And how do I penetrate this? When you think about artists like Banksy or Prince, writing slave on his face, or Banksy, selling his artwork and putting a paper shredder to activate it the second it's acquired, as a way to mock the whole system, right? So I feel like we're in a, so instead of just saying, "Oh, we're doomed. I'm too pure of an artist to get on this contaminated algorithm that wants to deplete me." In my opinion, the most extreme of the extreme artists will take this algorithm and poeticize its depletion on it, because that's part of what we need to say right now, is that this is zapping us out, not just artistically, intellectually, and on a human level. It's zapping us the fuck out.
Yeah, I think that leads us into like the next portion of the conversation, which is about ownership and the fact that artists have always had to sort of make a name for themselves. Like we know artists by their name. We don't know them by, oh, that one, whenever, even when we say the water lilies, it's like Monet's water lilies. And when we think about people who create stuff online, we're like, did you see that video? And usually we can never both remember the name of the person who created the video. And so what in that, like, what remains in that equation, and who gains in that equation, like who actually comes out on top, or what's the cost and what's the benefit, like this sense of losing ownership over our own work and our own names through the internet, and also gaining it in a way, like the sort of double-edged sword. um as just in my own understanding of the world, like the world is just a hall of mirrors, and that sense, and like everything has its own polarity. So that sense of like extreme ownership, where we, our name is attached to everything, everything has an at, everything has a, and also Instagram and TikTok always putting a watermark on everything, right? This sense of ownership, and what we sign our rights away when we sign these terms and conditions to join these platforms to make a name for ourselves, even though people won't remember our name or even know, how many people when they first meet me, they, you've been following me online for, we've been following each other, I mean, at least 5 6 years, and if not like seven, or yeah, if not longer. And you didn't know how to pronounce my name, not because, not for any other reason, but because that's just not a priority in that space. So just that sense of identity and personhood and ownership of who you are and what you create. And this is also, this has been a conversation many times, because a lot of people who are like full-time content creators, or what I would say marketers, right, people who really make their money off of reviewing brands, but brands have paid them to do that, product placements, all these kinds of things, um talking about money, and uh what they get for what they do, or how much they have to pay, or all these different things, where they're, you kind of, it's revealed how much they're sort of just a cog in the machine, or sort of a puppet, so to speak, for a certain kind of marketing entity that doesn't have like a specific brand's name on it, because a lot of brands can come in and sort of be a part of that entity and operate through that entity to get what they want. And it just sort of muddies and creates this whole world of like, who is at, like, who's behind the curtain, like Wizard of Oz style, like who is actually the wizard at the beyond these sort of pearly gates, who's gaining from all of this, and what is our intention with technology and with being on these platforms. um and it's also really interesting because the incentive online is so different than it is in the physical material world, that like what is rewarding to you online can be very different from what you value outside of the internet. And so having a completely different set of values and interests on the internet, what I would pay for to go and see is not what I would spend a majority of my free time watching for free online. So just that dissonance of like, what you would pay for, and that to do with ownership as well. So yeah, ownership is a wild thing when it comes to the internet.
It is. We what number are we on? Okay. Should we? I think we should do a quick little recap. So we're talking about 5 different ways, fun ways to think about the internet that is not what we're used to try to kind of modernize the paradigm so we can design better things and have better experiences on the internet. So the first one was talking about the concept of offline versus online, um, and how essentially the world is online now. So the stationary internet that we experienced as kids, or in the rise or the start of the internet, where there was an actual place you could log off to, that place is gone now. Now we're just in a fully integrated internet world. Okay, that was number one. Number two was, remind me. The death of the rabbit hole in the website, how the way social media has been designed has essentially made website the function of the website less proprietary, more obsolete, and how that threatens our ability to own what we put on the internet, and to have, a quality experience where there's more agency on our parts as consumers. Okay, and the third one was the artists being tech phobic. Yeah. So the third one is, I really want to encourage people, especially artists, to consider technology as a medium of art. And I understand and have a lot of empathy for why we're so anti-tech, why we get, left and right, you see these headlines of so and so decided to stop using social media. We were once, again, another interesting nuance, and this is why it's so important to be sensitive to the media climate, is that in the before COVID, there was an era where the silence, being silent, had prestige, and it was almost a sense of security, and almost proved how pure of an artist you were. um, I believe that has shifted, where that same silence operates as a vacuum. So where it was once maybe an asset to be seen as like a pure artist, to be super silent, now I think it's a liability, because you are isolating yourself and quite literally locking yourself out of the zeitgeist, which I know it's tempting, but how else are we going to get in contact with you or get to know your stuff, one way or the other? Not saying you have to get on the camera and talk, but again, if you could design an app, if you could design a social media experience, don't I don't want us to just be at the mercy of what tech bros think we should be designing. I want to know how an artist would design social media, and the experience, not just the the utility, but as well as like the more poetic sides of it. Part of why we fell in love with Apple is because that first experience of touching the screen, it was so magical. You can tell someone cared, right? So why are we not doing more of that? Why am I not having more experience? And it has to come from someone who has a passion for creating that type of special experience. And I'm not saying no one does it. I'm just saying like go on LinkedIn and you'll know what I mean when it's like that's a UI nightmare and it should not exist in 2025. That doesn't make any sense to me. But it's one of the most powerful apps because of the database that it has, but the interface is all fucked up. Anyway, okay, so that was number 3. And then what was number 4?
Number four is we're talking about ownership, and that's where we've kind of left off. So
Okay, so why don't you take us into ownership, or we already kind of talked on it. Did you want me to add anything to that, or because I like what you said?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's necessarily necessary to
That's
say
fine.
anything else about
So do
ownership,
we
but
want to go on to the 5th one then?
yeah, yeah. So that's the our final one is the ability to have access to anyone, and what that means for the future of collaboration, expectations, and like a post celebrity world, like post centralization of interface and
That's
contact
good.
and
That's
engagement.
good. Okay. Why don't you start?
Okay. Yeah, I think that when it comes to I've definitely utilized having access to anyone. And I think that uh I think that there's a huge future in creating our own miniature worlds. Um, which is so funny because it's almost like a backtrack to MySpace, where MySpace, like, you could code it yourself. And you had your own song and you had your own, that platform had like a very different vibe than even I remember when Facebook came around. It was kind of like it's very jarring, coming from MySpace. And that sense of like having your own world, like choosing the wallpaper, choosing all of these different aspects of and updating it frequently, like you're always changing your top 5 friends, you're always changing your song, you're always changing your profile picture, and that kind of like keeping up with and being really cognizant of what your own world looks like, and how you're who you're inviting into it, what kind of outreach you do from that place, what kind of home you're kind of creating on the internet. I think all of those things help to create that sense of like, I really think the word community is overused, but when I'm using the word community in this context, it's like so that you can connect to people who really see you and that can really understand what you provide and what your vision of the world is, and how that's been created through your aesthetic and um all the other kinds of choices that you can make and that are possible online. And I also think like the decentralization of fame is huge because you
Mhm.
technically do have access to literally anyone. The only the only person I realized recently who you cannot message is Megan Fox. But there's always a way. There's always a person who knows a person. There's always and you can get in with the person that knows the person that knows the person. You can get directly to the person you and so that also that creates um a setup for intention because you have to have an intention. You have to have that sense of like shooting your shot or engaging with someone else or offering to collaborate because it's so easy to reach out. And people do say anything. I'm sure you've gotten DMs that are insane, like I have, where it's like, wow, you're utilizing your sort of one interface with me or your one time to your first impression for this. And so that 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 wall that we've created, that we sort of took to the internet, that was created through the celebrity, of having all these expectations of them and what they should do and how they should dress and how they should be, and not knowing anything about their life but projecting onto their life. And then we've taken that onto the internet, where but like the person that you're speaking about or making content about can read your comment, can interface with what you feel about them. And so I think that one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up because it's like, yeah, utilize it, but it's also just the concept of how connected we really are, and what kind of possibilities that opens up, because it's literally anything, like any possibility. Um, you'd be surprised by how many companies and wild collaborations happen via DM. For some reason, the only one I'm thinking of is that Bobby Althoff Drake whole debacle, right? Where it was like it happened in DMs on Instagram. And I think that it also just creates this whole opening of the possibilities of these back doors of, like, these companies never actually know the full capacity of what they're creating until we start using it and being like, oh, you can do this on this. And they didn't necessarily design it for that. And maybe they hate that that's a feature of it, and but they need it for something else. Like starting to use these backdoors, starting to understand the full functionality of what you're using, understanding the tools you're using, and they're and like taking your intentions for the world in your own life and bringing it to the tools, and not letting the tools dictate what your goals and your art and your presentation and your everything looks like, because we're starting to see it more be like life imitates internet.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the concept of celebrity dying, I agree with it. Um, I also feel though that we will hold on a little tighter to the celebrities that were bona fide celebrities in the time where that existed. Like that's what I'm feeling more like this, grab on Britney, this grab on, even Beyonce, Rihanna, because they're kind of like the last ones before all this. So I find that to be really interesting, and yeah, I agree with just like there isn't enough power that we have as artists and creators on the platform and the way the internet is built. And again, like all I really care about people understanding is there is technology beneath the software we use that is really vast, and that if we mistake the real internet, right, with Instagram, with TikTok, we're undermining how the magnitude of this invention, of this innovation. We're undermining what's possible. And to your point, we just adopt, like, I'm sure a Gen Zer who wants to be like a YouTuber doesn't really understand all these layers we're talking about. They just know, they just are kind of immersed into this social environment that told them, here it's really cool if you can be a YouTuber, without having any context of what is YouTube, what is the internet, what is life before the internet, like all of that stuff. And that all this stuff happened probably literally when they were like born. Like all this stuff didn't even exist even while they were like first got here. So, I will give a lot of credit to my dad. My dad was the first one. There's a funny story where I wanted an AOL email address because all my friends had AOL, and my dad had been buying me domain names since I was like a baby, right? Buying domain names. And whenever I gave my email address out to my friends, they would be like, ew. Like it was like out of style to have something that was not AOL. And I told him about this, and he was like, why would you want to advertise for AOL? He's telling me this at like 9, like 8, no, no, like I'm not shitting you. And just those questions imply this context that I think I'm trying to bring to light, that the young YouTubers and content creators aren't even thinking about. To your point, these watermarks and all this stuff were stamped up with these third party platforms and applications. And I think my dad's influence, made me always prioritize the fact that I have the right to own a piece of this for real. And I don't need to be an app's little advertisement, you know. I can build my own shit on here. So
Yeah, I think that's part of the future is getting back to, because that's what's so funny is we were sort of baited into social media with MySpace, the most customizable platform, and we've gotten to the point where you can't even download your own video that you made on TikTok without a watermark unless you post it, and then they reduce the quality, and then you know and so that sense of, like, our point 4 of ownership and what it really means to own what it is that we bring to the world and the internet, and that it's like what we bring to the world first, and the internet gets what we give it, which is such a powerful thing, like, because in the world, it's like, you if you go to if you go to below 5, you're in below 5, and whatever's happening in below 5, and however you look, and from whatever angle, and whatever, and there's this way that the control and the possibility of the internet and what you can create, and the personas, and the alter egos, and the visions of the world that some people had to make literally physically out of clay and then do stop motion to be able to get that kind of vibe, we now can make an AI image or just create for ourselves on a TikTok. Like, it's a huge, not privilege in a way of like anything else, but just saying, like, it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And I think seeing the internet as opportunity and as like a baby and a blue ocean again,
Hmm.
as like a campaign for this collaboration.
I already have T-shirts being made. That's my slogan.
Perfect. Yeah, we need them. I think that's a perfect way to sum it up, because a lot of times people hear, like, oh, the death of the rabbit hole, the death of the celebrity. It's like, it's not necessarily about, it's actually always metaphoric with the internet. And there's always space for more. And you can always delete and then remake, it's never dead. Like, it's hard to even get rid of things actually on the internet these days. So
Right.
that sense of what's possible and what's here is endless.
Agreed.
Um, cool. Why don't you unmute yourself for this last part where we are just signing off?
We're signing
Um,
off. This was good. I feel like this was what I wanted it to be.
yeah,
Meaningful, just fresh. I like being able to have a fresh conversation about the internet.
yeah, yeah. It's insane how much tech was involved in the difficulty of this conversation.
It's like a joke.
Yeah, but I also feel that our commitment to people hearing it will be felt no matter what happens with what happens.
Yeah,
I would love for us to both share, just as we like sign off, like where our favorite place to hang out on the internet or within the internet, or our most exciting thing about the potential of the internet is right now.
well, the place I like to hang out the most is Pinterest for sure, hands down.
Mm.
Um, and uh, where I see it going, man, shit's about to turn up. Like shit is about to turn up. It's about to be 2025. Everything's about to turn up. Crypto's gonna turn up. AI is gonna turn up. Um, yeah, we're gonna feel more rocks in the it's gonna go the economy, the political climate. I don't see us. I don't see calm waters. I see more turbulence. But we are in a wild, wild west. It's a cowboy season too. I think that's another thing we don't realize. Like the internet being a baby, it's a wild, wild west. Grab what you can because it will get more regulated. I think and I do think as we were saying earlier, this is a pivotal time where if we do not take agency over this now, we could lose the amount of freedom that we have. Like just a simple fact that we can pretty much have these media channels that reach anyone in the world. I don't know if we're going to have that in 50 years. I really just can't tell you if that's going to be a thing, and it's definitely not going to be a thing if we're not you know, out in the streets trying to design more decentralized access to the internet.
Yeah, I actually think that's one of the things that the quote unquote TikTok ban, or the looming possibility of a TikTok ban, has done, is like created a sense of urgency on the internet that hasn't happened in a very, very long time. Uh, because there just is no urgency on the internet. You can always save it for later. You can always see it again. You know, that sense of novelty has been cheapened, and like real scarcity is not a thing anymore. And actually, that's one of the ways that I'm really having fun with the internet right now is I really hate online shopping, but I've recently been using online shopping as a way to practice like certain values of mine. So like how I buy, what I buy, when I buy, how long it takes me to buy, do I save it in bookmarks, all of those kinds of things, like using my buying decisions as like portals or entrances into practicing more of my own values.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's meant a couple fun purchases as of late that I'm like proud of and happy with, which is really cool. And just
Mhm.
also less fear of buying on the internet because there's a lot of um I have a lot of like trepidation about internet shopping.
Yeah, and it's only getting more gamified for sure. Internet shopping. Internet shopping is only getting more gamified, and that's really dangerous. But we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I bought my first I let myself watch one of those cute like internet shopping TikToks
Mhm.
and let myself buy something off of it because I was like, I just want to see like what this whole process is like. And the product actually ended up being like better than I expected. But the whole process is a bit like, yeah, there's a bit of dystopia around it for sure. Especially the way that it's happening on TikTok. And that's the one thing that I feel like hasn't been stolen from TikTok yet is it's sort of QVC style live shopping and the TikTok shop integration that's kind of made TikTok unbearable, but also made it very profitable. That sort of like unbearable, very profitable. Like I wonder, that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing what will happen to on like a micro scale in 2025.
Yeah, it should be interesting. It can go a few ways. But yeah, I'm definitely bullish on the live shopping. When I saw Amazon invest in the live shopping like a few years ago, first of all, live is just very powerful in general. So when you
Mhm.
mix shopping with it, it's not gonna miss. I do think it'll just, and the fact that it's like so popular in China, so popular in Asia, is usually an indicator that it's gonna come here and be just as popular soon. So
Yeah. Yeah, with the way the astrology looks, I'm like, there's definitely going to be a lot of like, in the next, I would say, year and a half, there's going to be a lot of big waves where we're like, oh, is this the new thing? And then it kind of regresses. And a lot of that sort of like ebb and flow where we're
yeah,
not actually sure what the next big thing is, which will be really exciting because all the people that sort of are just trend hopper kind of that kind of vibe or like to cling on to trends or their whole business is based off of it or their whole online presence is based off of it will have to find something else to do. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things I think to think about even within like the micro places of these particular apps and their particular features, and then also the being able to zoom out and like you said see the internet for what it is, which is like, Instagram is like a branch on a tree in a forest on a planet. It's not like yeah, it's not this isolated yeah, the centralization is has to change and will change.
agreed.
Okay. Should we stop the recording and then just turn to the live and
Oh yeah, that's not a bad
wrap it
idea
up? Okay.
for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll put wherever to find us in whatever description is attached to this video. But thank you.
Oh, they'll be fine.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.